We've lived through 100 years of advertising, propaganda to people to tell us that if you want to improve your life, go buy something, go shopping. It was the nephew of Sigmund Freud who created what he called propaganda, that we would call marketing or advertising. And he realized he could take his uncle's insights into psychotherapy, that actually what we deeply want is to be recognized, to be respected, to belong, to be admired. These are deep human desires. And he connected that with, buy this car and you will be admired. Buy that bag and you will belong. And so he created advertising that tapped into our deep social needs. And so we've had 100 years of people playing with our psychology like this. I only wish that he were alive today. I could say, Edward, well done. It worked. Now join the other team.
I'm guessing that if you're English, you already know about the guest of today, but for my usual Dutch listeners, I always shortly introduce my guest. Today's guest is a powerhouse of thought in the world of economics, Kate Raworth. She's the author of Doughnut Economy, a book that challenges everything we know about growth, wealth, and what it means to live well. Kate's been shaking up the field, advocating for an economy that works for people and the planet, not just for profit. If you think we need an actual fresh framework on how to run the world, this conversation is for you. And if you're already more familiar with her work, I tried my best to include questions that strive from her usual points. Enjoy. After this question, I want to go into the donut theory, but I always like to ask just a little starter question to get into the conversation with people. And my favorite one is, what is the last time you really changed your opinion on something?
Oh, I have to think about that a lot because I don't change my opinion on things fundamentally every day. I need to think about that. I don't have a quick answer for you on that, I'm afraid.
You want a minute?
Yeah, give me a minute. Let me think. When did I last change my mind on something fundamental? You have to sit still. Okay. I was raised without religion, and I'm not religious. And I've been very atheist all my life, and I still am an atheist. But I'm more interested in the worldview of, or the way of seeing the world through a Buddhist lens. That's been really interesting to me recently. And the concept of interbeing is an extraordinary concept, that we only exist in relation. We only exist in relation to others. So the concept of interbeing and the interdependence of all life, I can't say it's changed my view, but it's been a real massive eye-opener for me to think of life in those terms.
Why did that change?
I hadn't heard of this concept, interbeing.
Yeah.
The recognition that everything is relational, that where does my body begin and where does my body end? It changes the way you see everything. I mean, you can say quite easily, everything is interconnected, but it's a very profound expression of everything being interconnected.
Was it like a recent development or something that has been going on for a bit longer?
I had a chance to go on a wonderful Buddhist retreat in October, a year ago, in October 2023.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I learned these ideas then, and I find them very profound. I'm not a Buddhist, and I'm not intending to become a Buddhist, but I'm very influenced by those ideas. And I find it a very powerful expression of seeing the interconnectedness of everything in life and aspiring to interbeing as a very high value.
Where'd you go for the Buddhist retreat?
There's a place called Plum Village.
Is it still in the UK?
No, it's in Bordeaux in France.
Okay, yeah.
And you can go there for a week, or you can read the works of the Zen Buddhist master who was there before, called Thich Nhat Hanh. He's no longer alive, but he founded and inspired the community that practices there now.
Okay, you just go there, and they're, I'm assuming, a bunch of monks or something.
Yeah, monks and nuns. Yeah.
And they teach you stuff.
Yeah, you go on a week-long retreat, and you sit in meditation, and you sit in talks every day from the monks and nuns, listen to the teachings, and sit in community, in circles with people. That was really powerful. You sit in a group of about 12 people who are also there on the retreat. We don't know them at all, but they are brought together in a small circle, and you're either chopping food every day or cleaning the toilets together every day, having tasks, and it builds a connection. It builds a connection of people. And I was really struck when I was there of how quickly people want to connect, and how quickly we can go from being strangers to knowing each other's names, to doing an activity together, like chopping the vegetables, to actually, and then sharing quite openly about things you feel vulnerable about or worried about or things that matter to you or that happen to you in life. And you can very quickly care about people who just yesterday were a stranger to you. And I find that a really profound human trait.
Yeah. Is it something you haven't really experienced before, or not as profound as this on this trip?
I've experienced it a lot in life and in the different communities I've been part of, but being in a group where you arrive and one day you're all strangers, and then the way they set you up in small groups, how quickly that group becomes a coherent collective and how quickly you develop a sense of belonging to that group. I was really noticing it and I was really struck by it. And I think we live in times of real crisis and change, and it was profound and hope-bringing to see the deep trait in humans that we look to connect and we want to belong and we can care for each other quickly.
Yeah. All right. So let's go slowly towards the donut. So what is wrong with the way we get taught economics today in school?
So economics is a very powerful subject that a lot of students study a little bit of and then go on to be a lawyer or a community organizer or a doctor or a politician or a business person or an entrepreneur. And so it really shapes the way we think. But I think the concepts at the heart of economics that's still taught in school are out of date. The textbooks of the 20th century cooked up in the 19th century. So they are no way serving a generation of these times. So it starts with supply and demand, a crisscross of the market, right? There's the first diagram that every student remembers learning, which puts the market at the center of our vision. It means price is the metric that we judge the economy by. And anything that falls outside of the market contract gets called an externality. So economists talk about externalities, negative externalities or positive externalities. But if we're going to talk about climate change, biodiversity loss, these get termed as environmental externalities in economics. And to me, it's just insane that one of the most critical destructions that's going on in the world today is referred to as an externality. That itself tells you that we need to reframe and rethink the way we imagine the economy and put that at the center. It's foundational rather than peripheral to what matters.
I think it's been 12 years since you first published a paper about the donut theory, and it's been, I think in 2017 that you published a book. Have you seen improvements in our education of economics since then?
There are lecturers in universities, but also in schools and colleges all over the world who have picked up these ideas and started teaching them. Actually, one of the most encouraging things that I saw as soon as the book came out in 2017 was teachers would connect with me on Twitter and saying, I'm teaching this, I'm bringing this to my students. It's not on the curriculum, but this is what I think they need to learn. So I'm going to teach this. So yes, people have brought it in. At the same time, the discipline of economics is very resilient to change. And so it's come into almost every other discipline faster than into economics. So students are learning about it if they're studying medicine and human and planetary health, they're studying urban design, they're studying politics or architecture, engineering. Lots of people get in touch, say, oh yeah, I studied the donut. I learned about these ideas in my degree more than in a mainstream economics degree.
If you go back to the basics, why should people, and especially young people, care even about economics? Because is that not something for boring old accountants who destroy their backs all day by sitting in front of Excel sheets?
Well, that's the way it often gets depicted. And I think it's really political how economics gets depicted. If it gets depicted as boring, technical, mathematical, dry, then most people turn their back and say, I'm not interested. But actually, it's the design system that runs the world. So we should all care because it massively impacts on everyone's lives. So if you go back to the root of the word economics, it comes from ancient Greek. Ekos means the household and nomos means the management or the art of management. So economics literally means the art of household management. Here, a quarter of the way through the 21st century, where we are right now, we are literally destroying the foundation of life, of our planetary home. So 21st century economics desperately needs people who are going to put planetary stability at the center of their vision. This is not dry and technical, and you're not going to find the answers in an Excel sheet. The answers start here in the way we think, in our mindset, rethinking, and then designing the economy so that it's actually in service to life rather than in service to finance.
Yeah. So a little while as a response to that, you came up with the Doughnut Economy. For the people that are unfamiliar with it or that need a refresher, how would you explain it?
So we need a vision or a goal of what we're aiming for. And I think we've inherited an economy that's aiming for endless growth, measured in GDP, national income, right? Endless accumulation of financial wealth. That is the goal to which all economic institutions are currently driving. And it's an insane goal on a delicately balanced planet. We need to meet the needs of all people, the human rights of every person in the world, and we need to protect the living planet. I drew a diagram. I tried to come up with a new vision, and it turns out looking like a donut. So if you imagine humanity's use of Earth's resources radiating out from the center of this picture, then the hole in the middle here, this hole is a place where people are falling short on the essentials of life. It's where people do not have the resources they need for health, education, housing, income, food, water, energy, transport. These 12 social dimensions are crowdsourced from the Sustainable Development Goals. And the power of that is that all the governments in the world have already agreed that every person in the world has a right not to live in this hole. So leave nobody in the hole. Get them over the social foundation. But as we collectively, 8 billion people, seek to meet our needs and our wants, our so many wants, we not only can seek to get over a bare minimum, but also we start to put so much pressure on the life-supporting systems of this planet that we begin to kick our planet out of balance. We cause climate breakdown, we acidify the oceans, we create a hole in the ozone layer, convert too much land, withdraw too much water, create biodiversity loss. And these around the outside, beyond this ecological ceiling, these are the 9 planetary boundaries recognized by Earth system scientists that keep this planet in balance, keep life working. So we need to leave no one in the hole, but not overshoot the life support systems of our planetary home. And the result is the shape of a donut. That's why it's called Doughnut Economics. And the goal of this is not to grow endlessly, it's to thrive in balance between the social foundation and the ecological ceiling. It's a completely different shape of progress. It's about thriving, as we know in our own bodies, right? We thrive in health. We have enough food, enough water, enough oxygen, enough warmth to stay alive, but not too much. Too much of any of these things will kill us. Yeah. So we know that health lies in balance in our own bodies. Can we take what we know in the human body to the planetary body and reframe our sense of success away from endless growth towards thriving in balance? That's what the donut invites us to reimagine.
So of these boundaries, how many are we crossing at the moment?
Earth system scientists tell us that we are over at least 7 of these 9 planetary boundaries.
Which 7?
We are overshooting on climate breakdown, on ocean acidification, too much chemicals, too much phosphorus and nitrogen through fertilizers, on water, too much land being converted, too much biodiversity loss. So all of these 7, we are in overshoot. And then on the social foundation, around the world, there are people falling short on every single one of these. So here we go. Overshoot and shortfall at the same time. In fact, this diagram isn't even updated because since I printed this version of it, the scientists have come back and said we are actually now in overshoot on ocean acidification as well.
Great.
So this is the state of the world. It's not a pretty picture to look at, right? It's a world profoundly out of balance. Billions of people falling short on life's essentials.
I don't see red at air pollution, but isn't air pollution at the moment also like, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I saw a Guardian article, I think about a year ago, saying that the air pollution in Europe killed, I think, 200,000 people prematurely. But I don't see air pollution here red. Is that still up to date? Or
it's because I think so within regions of the world, yes, there is extreme air pollution. Yeah. But collectively at the global scale, then they're not yet able to say We are over a global air pollution. So this is the global scale. But of course, all of these impacts can be happening really intensely locally. So this is taking an aggregated picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are in overshoot around the world. And for me, this is a really critical point that last century's economic theorists weren't looking at this, right? This is a new recognition of the extent to which the world is out of balance socially and ecologically. So last century's economic theory was not created to solve this problem. They didn't even see it. Why would we expect it to turn this story around? Last century's government policies were not designed to solve this. Most of last century's government policies are designed to create economic growth, which can help reduce poverty if it's really redistributive, which it isn't today. But it is not at all designed to bring us back within planetary boundaries. Why would we think last century's government policies were going to solve this? Last century's business models, the way that companies are designed, what they're set up to do, does not turn this story around. We need to redesign our institutions with this as a starting point of the story we need to now reverse.
Yeah, so if you go towards that story, are there any industries besides the obvious one, the fossil fuel industry, that just doesn't fit in the healthy economy that we are looking for?
So I think we've inherited a lot of industries that are degenerative by design, right? They take us materials, make them into stuff we want. We use it for a while, just often only once, throwing it away, and then throw the waste away. So the industrial design of the 20th century is inherently degenerative by design. I can show you with a hose pipe, right? It's like a linear degenerative design. Stick stuff in the hose pipe of production, make it into things we want to throw it away. That linear process is what pushes us over those planetary boundaries. And every single industry needs to transform to make it a circular or cyclical regenerative process so that resources aren't used up. They're not thrown away. There is no away.
Yeah.
They need to be used again and again, far more carefully, collectively, creatively, and slowly. And this is the beginnings of a regenerative economy. So every industry needs to transform and say, what would it mean, whether it's house building or agriculture or textiles or foods or electronics? What does it mean to massively reduce the through flow of materials, to maintain things, to repair them, refurbish them, reuse them, ultimately recycle them, but never to throw them away. So you're sending things around and around these loops of reuse, recognizing some things are biological. Nature takes things back down to, if you plant food waste in the soil, it will turn back into soil, right? Nature regenerates. That's what life is. Can we mimic that in technical materials like with metals and fabrics and other things? Can we mimic nature's cycles? So every industry needs to transform.
Yeah. But are there also any industries that we should like completely get rid of? Because I think most of us at this point will agree the fossil fuel industry that just doesn't have any place in the new green economy that we want to move towards to. Are there any other examples of industries that just fully or almost for the biggest part don't fit in there? Or is it mostly about reshaping most of them, as you just told me?
So I think we need to think about what do we fundamentally need. Start with human needs. We need clothing, we need housing, we need food, warmth. So we need industries to be in service to human needs. But today, a lot of those industries are designed to generate the maximum returns for their shareholders. So it's not, to me, it's not about shutting down an industry, it's about completely repurposing it. Yeah. But for example, I think the extent of animal-based agriculture is way out of scale with what this planet can sustain. So I think we need massively to shift our diets away from meat and dairy-based to plant-based. Now, that's going to close down a lot of the scale of cattle, poultry, pig farming. I think it'll still exist in some form, but massively reduced and massively transformed so that it actually is within the cycles of the living world rather than destroying them.
Yeah. The question becomes, how did we get here? And to the point where economic growth seems the sole focus. That is a complicated question, but a part of the answer lies in a specific guy. Who is Rational Economic Man?
Rational Economic Man is a creation of... Rational Economic Man is a portrait of humanity.
Yeah.
Created by economists. since the 1870s, a character placed at the heart of the economic play. And he's created so that he can be modeled, he can be fit into the Excel sheets and fit into the models. So think of a man standing alone. He's got no dependents, no children he's raising, nobody. He's not caring for anybody. He's an independent, solo person. No interbeing going on here.
Just a little island.
A little island, a little human island. He stands alone. He's got money in his hand because he interacts with the world through markets. He's got ego in his heart. He's got a calculator in his head. He's got nature at his feet. He hates work. He loves luxury. He knows the price of everything. He can never get enough. These are the characteristics given to the model of man that's known as rational economic man. And this model is taught to students as a model, but as a sufficiently good model that we can then recognize ourselves in him. And the real problem with that is that the more that students are told this character is like us, we start to become like him. Students over time, from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 of their studies, the more they learn about rational economic man, the more they value his traits.
They start to reproduce his traits.
They start to perform and become like him. Yeah, and reproduce his traits. So they say they value self-interest over altruism as a successful economic trait. They start to value competition rather than collaboration. So who we tell ourselves we are shapes who we then become. We are remade by this model of ourselves. And if we don't rewrite that character, I think there's absolutely no chance of us thriving. 8 to 10 billion people together on this planet, if we keep going around thinking that we are like rational economic man, because actually we are the most pro-social of all mammals. We collaborate with others beyond our immediate family in a way that no other animal shows us that they are able to do. It's a phenomenal human skill to be pro-social. And rather than telling ourselves that we are individual, competitive, we actually need to recognize the other side of our personalities, which is that we are collaborative. We are caring of others. We depend upon each other. No human survives alone. We are deeply pro-social, need to nurture that side of our humanity if we're going to thrive together and create economic institutions that bring that out.
I did have a question about that, because the question basically is, to what extent when we are designing these new economic systems are we fighting human nature? Because I truly do believe in the good of people. Rutger Bregman, a Dutch historian, wrote a great book about that. I truly believe in it. But also, but as zoologist George Monbiot shows, humans have been hunting species into extinction 10 to 15,000 years ago as well. Megafaunas have been eliminated in the Americas and Australia, New Zealand, Madagascar and Europe. That domination of nature seems to have been present back then as well. Yeah.
So humans have overexploited their landscapes and the nature around them. This is a long-standing human mistake we've made. But those cultures have learned, many of those cultures learned from that, right? Many indigenous cultures now have at the heart of their principles, 7th generation thinking. Don't take the first, don't take the last. Recognize yourself as part of a kin-centric way of life. So actually, cultures that once overexploited the land have often massively learned from that and embedded that learning at the heart of their principles today. I think the Western industrial culture that I've been raised in, that we're part of in the West, has not learned that and is in the process of doing that at a planetary scale and in the process of running down the life support systems, not just of a bioregion, of a locality, of a valley, but of an entire planet. So we are so slow to learn what other cultures have already learned from their own mistakes and embedded in the heart of their own philosophy.
Are you saying that the domination of nature that I just described isn't as big as a part of human nature, and that it's just a learning curve that each culture or group has to go by themselves?
I don't know if we have to go through it. I mean, we would be smart to use our ability to learn from others, right? Yeah. And we have a capacity to learn from our mistakes and learn from when we've overextended ourselves, we've overstretched, and the impact that we've had on the wider. So do we have to go through the scale of destruction that we're causing right now? We could be learning so much more. I think the West has a very dominant impact and has colonized and pressed its worldview upon the rest of the world. It's time to pull that back with humility and learn back from other cultures from how they've now embedded that learning in their own worldview. So I don't think we have to go through, I mean, that would be kind of fatalistic to say we have to go through this, right? We have to learn from what's already been learned.
Yeah. Should we in the Netherlands consume less?
The Netherlands, like the UK, is living way beyond its planetary share of the footprint, right? It's massively overshooting planetary boundaries on carbon emissions, on fertilizer use, on biodiversity. So the first requirement is to combat within planetary boundaries.
Yeah.
The Netherlands, like all high-income countries, needs to massively reduce its impact on the planet. How you do that, that's the question. That's the design question. But certainly, consuming, what does it mean to consume, right? What we need to do is stop the through flow of taking new materials and throwing them away. We need to, again, create this kind of circular reuse, repair, save, value things longer, hold them longer. So there's a fantastic initiative called Take the Jump, which says if you want to live a lifestyle that's compatible with keeping global heating within 1.5 degrees, there's a bunch of things you can do. Don't own private transport, like don't own a car if you can avoid that. Right? You use public transport, use a bike. Buy only 2 or 3 items of clothing a year. Change your smartphone or your tablet only once every 6 or 7 years. Take a short-haul flight only every 2 or 3 years, a long-haul flight only 7 or 8 years. Eat a plant-based diet, right? These are the shifts that they're saying so is that reducing consumption? Yes, it's reducing our impact on the planet. You can lead a great lifestyle. Actually, many people much prefer leading a lifestyle that is inspired by those principles and knowing that you're part of a thriving world.
So what I am really curious about, so there's a group of people in the Netherlands, but I think in a big part of the West, so in Europe and in the Americas as well, who is scared of their freedom getting taken away in the name of climate change or in the name of battling climate change. That the government is going to be the big super nanny deciding what they can or can't do. How should we address these concerns?
So what is one person's freedom? I think we are free to the point that we act without impinging on the rights and the freedoms of others. We now know enough about climate change to know that if I am taking all the flights I want and putting the heating on full blast in my house and leaving all the windows open and consuming energy, I am generating carbon emissions that impact on the stability of the climate that are impacting today for years and many decades to come, impacting on the very right to life of other people. So I am not free to do what I want if it impinges on the life, the well-being, the livelihood, the security, the health of other human beings. That is not freedom. We need to define freedom within limits so that we don't harm the lives of others and not even just human beings, the living planet. That's the space in which we can be free to create. So I think the word freedom is getting weaponized, is getting thrown around as if don't you claim any restraints on my behavior. And yet there are so many restraints on our behavior that we all know are required. In this country, you cannot carry guns into a school. You cannot carry guns in public, and people don't want that. That is a restraint of one person's claim to freedom. I want to carry a gun to protect everybody else. And we know why we have that rule. You cannot park your car in the middle of the street. You cannot put, right? You cannot drive along the tramway. Why not? That's my freedom. So there are really clear rules that we make so that we can live well together. And to claim that's a restraint on my freedom is to ignore the conditions that need to be in place so that people can live well together. That is a really important social conversation. But let's not weaponize this word of freedom so that we can be as destructive as we like with no responsibility towards other people. That is failing to recognize our deep interdependence.
Yeah, what you just described, it used to be a very classical liberal idea, hasn't it?
What of my freedom is the limits of my freedom are the point at which
exactly.
Yes, and I think that idea still holds. What's changing is our understanding of the profound interconnectedness of the world.
Yeah.
That I used to think I was free to burn as much fuel as I like on my land, and that's my choice. We now understand that through the mechanism of the atmosphere, we are destabilizing the entire climate, and my actions here could help cause a drought on the other side of the world or a flood. Yeah. So the more that we understand how interconnected we are, the more that actually makes us reinterpret what we have a claim or what we can or can't do in the name of freedom without undermining the rights of others. So it's a big shift in your worldview as you gradually realize how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, we just briefly talked about in the Netherlands and in a lot of countries in the world that we should definitely limit consumption. Are people ready for that, to limit their consumption? Because if you look at least in the Netherlands, the consumption per capita is higher than ever before. So it is a big struggle to make it politically viable.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's a struggle. I think we've lived through 100 years of advertising, propaganda to people to tell us that if you want to improve your life, go buy something, go shopping. It was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, a man called Edward Bernays, who created what he called propaganda, that we would call marketing or advertising. And he realized he could take his uncle's insights into psychotherapy, that actually what we deeply want is to be recognized, to be respected, to belong, to be admired. These are deep human desires. And he connected that with, buy this car and you will be admired. Buy that bag and you will belong. And so he created advertising that tapped into our deep social needs. And so we've had 100 years of people playing with our psychology like this. I only wish that he were alive today. I could say, Edward, well done. It worked. Now join the other team. Now help undo that psychological dependency that you've created on going shopping. How are you going to actually help people recover real autonomy, real connection, real belonging with each other that doesn't apparently depend upon that bag or that car or that latest phone? So this is a deep unraveling of a psychological dependence that's been created. Yes, I agree. I think it's a real challenge. And I think the advertising agencies, the industry, some people within it are taking a good hard look at what they've been employed to do and trained to do and asking, how can we now turn this around? What kind of messaging can actually help us recover from this addiction?
So how can we undo it? Because you just agreed that it is a big struggle and of propaganda of the last hundreds and hundreds of years. But the clock is very much ticking. How can we undo this in this small of a time frame?
Well, the way I'm coming at it from is to try and start with the deep mindset that we have. So not work at the point of a new not work at the point of a new advertisement. Yeah. Just change the words, change the picture. Just go right back into our fundamental education to recognize that we shouldn't start economics with the market and how can we sell more, and we use advertising for that. To come back and ask ourselves, on what do we depend and what is a good life? And we depend upon the integrity of this planet. How do we put a deep connection with the living world at the heart of our understanding of what it means to live? It's a deep philosophical change. And you might say, we haven't got time for that. Yeah. And yet we haven't got time to keep ignoring it. We haven't got time to keep churning out the next generation of students who are still market fixated, on growth fixated. So we need to work at many, many levels at the same time.
Yeah, because the argument I just gave you is, I think, a very common argument for the people who are in favor of green growth. So they say, we agree with the principles of post-growth in theory, but just because of political viability, it's just not realistic to have such a big mindset change in this small of a time frame. So instead we should focus on technological advancements to solve our climate change within the current economic system. So how do you look on those types of solutions? So how do you look towards that green growth and this criticism that they have on post-growth?
So the desire for green growth says we think we can have a rising GDP at the same time as falling carbon emissions, and not just carbon emissions, it has to be material footprint as well, right? Yeah. There are 9 planetary boundaries and carbon emissions are only one of them. Yeah, exactly. So we need to come back within all planetary boundaries. The green growth dream is that we can do that. We can massively reduce our footprint on this planet while having GDP going up, same as it ever did. Really nice dream. Problem with that is there's absolutely no evidence of any high-income country doing that at the speed and scale that's actually required. So all high-income countries that are going for this are cutting their carbon emissions and their impact on the world far too slowly. So we're not going to get there in time. There's no evidence that this green growth dream, promise, vision, that it works. The trouble is people have it on their job titles, on their name badge, on the name of the Ministry of Climate Change.
And we have it in the Netherlands at the moment.
The Ministry of Climate and Green Growth.
Exactly, yeah.
It's written onto reports, it's written onto departments. So the dream of it has run ahead of any proof of it happening. There is some decoupling, meaning, yes, there's over 25 countries that have got GDP going up and their consumption-based carbon emissions are going down. And everybody should celebrate that that's being achieved because we need all the decoupling we can get.
Yeah.
But it's nowhere close enough. It's like if I said to you, we got to get the last train home. We can't miss this train, but we'll only get it if we sprint. And then I start jogging really slowly. You would say to me, hey, you said we're only going to get this train if we sprint, and you're jogging. You are not going to make this train. I said, but I'm running. But you're just jogging. Yeah. So we're going to miss the train. It's the same. Yes, we are decoupling, but not nearly at the speed and scale that's required. So we're going to miss that train of coming back within Earth's capacity and holding the climate stable. So there's a real danger of the promise of green growth because it's so convenient. It's so convenient, it means you can keep on having a growing economy. Don't worry, we don't need to change anything fundamental. But it's not been proven. And to me, ultimately, the test of that is an ethical one. What's the ethics of saying, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that this dream of green growth, that we achieve it? Guess what? When it turns out that we realize or admit that we can't have both, guess which one we will stick with? It'll be the growth. It'll be, because it's so locked into the design of our economies, we will stick with the growth and let go of the vision of living within a stable climate. I can't live with the ethics of that. So I think we have to challenge the growth addiction that's been written into the design of our economies.
So the conversation about alternatives to endless economic growth has been going on for a little while now. Is there something you disagree with or see differently than the movement or other influential thinkers within the, let's call it the post-growth movement?
At the scale of national politics, it's incredibly difficult to get the post-growth conversation into national conversations because I think our national politicians are really caught in a very difficult way into the growth narrative. It is so written into the way they're expected to talk about the economy, and anybody who challenges that will be hit by the opposition, who will then try and spin what you're saying and try and make it sound really regressive. So it's very difficult, I think, to break the growth narrative in national politics. Where I think we've seen much more change is at local level, at the city or municipal level, where locally elected governments who aren't under the pressure of a national government to talk about growth, they're talking about thriving. We want this city, this town, this district, this region to thrive. We want the people here to live well, and we want to do so within our share of the means of the planet. So what we've seen at Doughnut Economics Action Lab is lots of city councils or local governments picking up these ideas. Amsterdam was the first to write Doughnut economic thinking into its circularity policy. Within 6 weeks, that inspired Copenhagen. Then it inspired Brussels, Barcelona, lots of cities across Europe and across the world. Nanaimo in Canada, Ipoh in Malaysia have said this concept of meeting the needs of all people within the means of the planet, thriving, this really makes sense to us. So we're working with now, there's over 90 local governments around the world that have engaged with these tools, and more than 50 of them have actually written it into their local policies and their processes, and they're making decisions differently. So we're focusing our energy with the governments that actually are doing this and showing what it means to start moving in a post-growth focus direction locally. So I'm really interested in learning back from those local politicians. How do they do this? How do they talk about it? What words, what framing works for them? It's more talking, they don't tend to talk about post-growth because that's just saying you're after something. But what are you for? They talk about thriving. They talk about being local, thriving, resilient, inclusive communities. So it's really great to learn from the language that people who are elected and want to be re-elected and want to make change happen locally, how do they actually put these ideas into practice? That's what we're focused on learning together with them and bringing them together so they can learn from each other.
Yeah. In a lot of places in Europe right now, just as in the Netherlands, the point of the discussion has been moved by alt-right parties to talk mostly about immigration and other scapegoats. How can we reclaim the conversation to talk about how it is the current economic systems and structures that cause many of our problems and not Muslims or queer people?
I think it's incredibly important to keep the focus on the vision that you stand for. Because what happens when othering happens, whether it's immigrants or people who aren't like me, right? It's catching attention and bringing up that part of humanity that distinguishes us and them, me versus you. It's that competitive othering, exactly that part of humanity that I think we're not trying to activate. You want to bring back that pro-social. So for me, I won't engage on those terms. I will keep bringing back a vision of what we stand for, meeting the needs and the rights of all people, doing it within the means of the planet. Keep speaking very clearly of what you stand for, because otherwise you get caught in somebody else's political debate and actually distracted away from the vision you want, and they will succeed as a result. So keep speaking of the values you for, and you'll find so many people share those values and don't want to get caught up in the political back and forth, the really aggressive, destructive, othering politics. We've got to come back, catch each other with shared, deeper values. To me, that, I don't know if this works, right? Things are not going well, but for me, that is where it feels the right place to keep speaking from, to keep reminding us of the values that sit true underneath.
How do we fix the power dynamic? Because for the people with the most power right now, it is in their short-term interest to keep the current economic system, to keep exploiting the planet and making more profit, even to the point of using their wealth to influence national politics. How do we counter that?
Yeah, right. Because the existing economic system is funded and refunded by people who are benefiting from it. So there's a very strong feedback loop of those benefiting from the system, financing politics that keep right. So how do you break into that? I'm not going to claim to have some easy answer, otherwise, hey, we'd have already done this. I think that power stands in solidarity, in building alliances with people who might not have exactly the same view of ourselves, but we recognize that we have shared humanity, that we have a shared interest in transforming the future. And I think it's the work of many. I think this is big teamwork. So there are some people who are incredibly brave activists who lock on to oil rigs, who expose current power. And I absolutely stand in solidarity with them. There are other people who go and work on the inside the system and try and change it from within, whether they're changing it from within politics or within companies. That's incredibly hard because you're surrounded by the system that resists you. Mm-hmm. But that work needs to be done. And it can take decades. And there are other people who start modeling and showing possibilities, setting up a new kind of company, creating a new kind of community, doing agriculture in a new way, different kind of politics. Again, fighting within the system, but making it visible. So we need all of these roles. The tiny bit of that part, that bigger story that I think Doughnut Economics brings is say, and as we change all these practices, we need to change our mindsets as well. We need to be informed by a different kind of economic thinking that will go along with this action, these activists, these new practices that underpins it or provides a theoretical framework that makes sense of it. So I see it as a small part of a very, very big collective movement. And also, don't try to be the movement, join the movement. The movement is bigger, right? The movement that's needed is bigger than any one organization name, any one idea. We need to come together rather than try and see differences between. See what's in common, see what we can build together, because that is how we begin to actually bring a grassroots, a people's sense of resistance and change.
Thanks so much.
My pleasure.